Okay, firstly, thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited for this conversation we're going to have today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nicole Morrison. I'm a board member at APA San Francisco. And today we're going to talk about collaborative negotiation. We're going to help you feel more confident going into jobs, winning them, and being happy with the terms that you've negotiated. And I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors for helping us put on this event and all of their support for APA. So shout out to John at Lux Incorporated, Suzette at the Blackwell Files, and Lupin and Ken at Capital Art. Thank you so much for your help. Please use the Q&A box throughout this talk. We're going to hold questions for the end, but we do want to give the opportunity for all of you who showed up today to submit your questions. So we have someone who's dedicated to watching the Q&A box for the entire presentation, and she's going to be feeding me questions at the end. And you're free to submit your question anonymously. We're not going to be saying your name when we say the question. So please, feel free to ask whatever you want, no pressure, no judgment. Okay, without further ado, I would love to introduce our panel. I'm going to kind of name them off, and then we'll hear a little bit from each of them about themselves. So we have Shel Burks, who is a producer at The Wall Productions. We have Monica, oh my gosh, I didn't double check how to pronounce your name, so please forgive me. Zaffarano?
Perfect.
Yay. Okay. Who is a executive producer at Tribe Production Collective. We have Kelly Montez, who is CEO and executive producer at Apostrophe Reps. And we have Heather Elder, who is the owner at Heather Elder Represents. Okay, so I would love to hear a little bit from each of you. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you do and how you got started, that kind of thing. Also feel free to tell us where you're based. So let's start with Shel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Shel Burks. I'm an executive producer with The Wall Productions. It's my own company. I've been in the business for quite some time. So those that do know me, I kind of fell into this business, so to speak. I have a project management and a techie background. And I just kind of fell into it like many of us do in this business. I'm based in Chicago. Anyone that knows me, I love what I do. I like to have fun with my work. And if I'm not having fun, then I don't want to do it. So if you're on the job with me, then you'll know that, we work hard and we play hard. So thank you for being here. And I'm excited to hear from all of you.
Thanks, Shel. Okay, let's hear from Monica.
Oh. Hi, everybody. So I'm executive producer of Tribe Production Collective. I've been in the industry for as long as I can remember. I think what keeps me here is all the amazing people that I meet. I've met a lot of good friends that started as colleagues, and it's kind of amazing how that works. So I am thrilled to be on panel with all you guys and with you, my dear. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm very busy. I'm on the road a lot. Where am I based? Today, Chicago. Then I'll be bouncing around for a while and I'll land in LA. So I'm moving to California soon.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Well, early welcome to California.
Thank you.
Okay, and Kelly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly. I'm the owner of Apostrophe Reps. My background actually started in advertising, where I used to work with Heather's husband before I became a rep. I was in New York for about 12 years before I moved out and opened up our office out here in LA. So we have offices in both New York and LA, and I'm just really honored that you would ask me to be on this panel. So thank you, Nicole, and to the APA.
Thanks so much for being here. Okay, and let's hear from Heather. Oh, you're on mute.
It's not like I've not done this before. Sorry about that. I'm Heather Elder. This is my first day on Zoom, not really. I have been doing this for quite a long time. I'm still in love with the industry and find it exciting and, inspiring every day. The most recent thing that I've been up to is, along with Kelly, we are the founding board members, 2 of the 7 founding board members of the Artist Management Association, which is really exciting. And I also host a podcast called Dear Art Producer. So I feel like I've got my finger on the pulse of a lot of different things going on in the industry. And hopefully today we can all share some really helpful insights for everybody.
Yes, Dear Art Producer, I highly recommend listening to it. Really great resource. Thank you for doing that. And also, could you tell us a little bit about the AMA while it's mentioned?
Sure, I'll defer to Kelly since she's the president of the AMA, but I'll let her speak to that.
Yeah, the AMA was born out of the pandemic. It's been happening for a while. There's been a lot of industry changes that I think collectively artists representatives have been concerned about. One of the main ones being usage and rights around that. And we came together and started this collective organization to create best business practices and come together and use our collective voice to champion for the industry and create a level playing ground. So really we are about educating our community much in the same way that the APA is, and the APA is a founding partner of the AMA, which we appreciate so much. And so really our goals are aligning there, in that we're trying to help educate our community in terms of best business practices. We're putting together some templates for terms and conditions that people can use when estimating, as well as a universal bid form. So we encourage everybody to check it out and join us as well.
Yes, thank you. That was perfect. I wanted to call it out while you mentioned it because I think it's a really great resource and I really appreciate what you all are doing. So, okay, let's jump into the conversation. We're going to kind of go into licensing a little bit here. But I want to make sure that people who are maybe newer to licensing or haven't used the licensing structure yet, I want everyone to be able to follow this conversation and not feel lost from the beginning and, like they can't follow us. So I would love to hear in your own words kind of how usage and licensing works and why it's important. And I'll start with Monica. Oh, and you know what? If your surroundings aren't too noisy, you can keep yourself off of mute if it makes it easier with, going back and forth, just opening the door for that there.
Well, licensing and usage is everything. That is the commodity, that's the currency that photographers have in this industry. And, the climate is pushing more and more clients are looking for that unlimited use and time. And I just want to go like this when I'm working directly with a photographer who is okay with that because they do want to do the job, and as we're slowly getting back to work. So I am definitely going to check out AMA, ladies. I want to know everything about it, and I advocate for being for the specificity that we have to put a box around what they're purchasing. And I've been doing this enough where I also work with many unrepresented photographers. So I've, by working with esteemed reps like these gals on panel, I have learned, I always learn something new when I'm working with a rep because they have a way of doing things and they also are advocating. So I've taken all those notes, I guess, if you will, and implemented them into how I work with photographers when they're not repped. So it's all about protection, and that is their currency. So we have to protect that. There should be a time stamp. There should be a usage stamp, a comprehensive usage stamp, so that then if they want to reuse, I'm all for advocating for that and having a structure. And I like if you guys are doing a universal sort of structure format, ladies. I think that's super awesome to help people guide that landscape. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I really like the way you phrased some of those points. I think that's really helpful for people to hear. Let's hear from Heather next.
I think usage is gosh, if you think about it, copyright is granted automatically with every image that is taken. And it is something that is to be preserved and even respected. And while the industry is moving towards, I don't want to say it's moving towards, it's just has embraced a little bit more readily the idea of unlimited use, unlimited time. You know, we're unwilling to give up the idea of copyright. And it's something that we need to defend and protect. And whenever I can limit usage, I will, but I also understand that there's a lot of my clients that do need unlimited or want unlimited use, unlimited time, especially in this digital world where it's so hard to manage the content that we create, the amount of content that we create. It's hard to manage it, but you know, the photographers that I represent, we rarely ever sell copyright, and there are, you know, very specific reasons we would do that, and we would charge for it. Okay. And I would also add that, you know, thank goodness we have usage, because last year during the pandemic, the usage was you know, helped us get through. So that was really important.
100%. Yeah, super valuable last year when a lot of people couldn't shoot new jobs and they were able to license stuff. Shel, would love to hear a little bit from you.
I'm excited to hear about the AMA, because I can defer to you when I do have questions as well, because even being in this business for so long, it's constantly evolving. And so anything that we can do collaboratively to learn together, I'm all for it. So thank you, ladies, for that. But when it comes to usage and copyright, I kind of look at it like your name and your social security number. I mean, it is your worth, it is your value, and people need to understand and respect that, you know, entirety, because, you know, everyone just thinks that they can that word just shoot it and it's just a photo. But no, you're reaching out to me because you see something in me. I value my word matters. And that is the one thing that people can hold on to and show, like, this is why you want me, and this is what my worth is. And then that's one thing I always try to remind people that I'm working with, whether, you know, they're licensed or whether they're with a rep or not, like, you know your worth and know your value.
Yeah, I love that. Whenever I see just in an email, like my alarm bells start going off.
That is the red, yes.
I just saw something come into the Q&A, and Kelly, I think you could touch on it when you say a few words here. But someone was asking us to define timestamp and usage stamp. So if you could touch a little bit on why it's important to put parameters on time and specific uses, that would be great.
Sure. That's another initiative that the AMA is doing, is that we're developing a usage glossary. So this is just to define all of the various usages. And there's so much to say on this topic. My brain is going in a million different directions. When it comes to usage and creating timestamps or being specific about it, it's important, like Shel said, in terms of knowing your worth, knowing the worth of the image. So if you're a still life shooter that is going to take a beautiful picture of a lemon or a flower that's going to be timeless, that a brand can use for years, decades, because it's so beautifully lit, that image has a lot of life behind it. And it's important that you get paid for the life of that image. And in order to make it affordable for a client, they should buy, in my opinion, the use that they need for their media plan. And it's also important to specify the terms. Third-party usage is not a throwaway. And sometimes I truly believe that clients don't understand what they're asking for with third-party. The best way I can describe this is in an example. And I am not saying at all that this brand does this. It's just an example to illustrate the point. But let's say you're shooting for a brand like a Sephora that sells many different brands, or a Walmart, whatever that might be. If you grant them third-party use, whatever products you're taking a picture for them, they could then, technically, if you grant them third-party rights, turn around and give that image to that other brand. So the picture that you thought you took for one brand actually becomes for another brand and moves down the chain. So it's important for you to understand the terms. It's important for you to think about the time that someone is going to use the image, and do they need that, and have that conversation and price it appropriately. Does that help to answer the question?
Yeah, I think that was great. So this was touched on a little bit, but there's licensing can be seen as a way to make the images affordable to our clients based on what they actually need the images for. Since you can exclude the uses that they don't need, that you would have to account for if you were giving them unlimited use. You would have to account for all the different ways they could profit off the images, right? So how does this play into your negotiations with clients? And do you have any tips for photographers on how to communicate this during the negotiation phase, especially for photographers who, aren't represented and they are having all of these conversations themselves? So let's start with Heather.
I think the biggest piece of advice that I could give is to make sure that you are incredibly clear with what the usage is. So let's assume they don't obviously want unlimited usage, unlimited time in this specific example, but make sure you are defining and you both understand the usage to be the same. For a long time, people would say, I need unlimited print. And it was like, okay, well, what is print? Is it consumer and trade advertising, or is it consumer trade, POS, out of home? So people lump things into print, and unless you are all on the same page of exactly what it is that you need to have usage for, it becomes ambiguous, and then someone can interpret your usage differently. So the first step in a clear negotiation is making sure that everybody's on the same page with exactly what it is that they need, or what they want, and then figure out what they need. So if their budget doesn't allow for everything they want, then you can point out to them, are you really going to do a billboard? Are you going to have things in the store? And then all of a sudden, when the client realizes maybe they're not going to have all of those things, they can pull back, or you can make that an extra usage add-on for a later time that they can come and get, or come and purchase later on.
Okay. Does anyone want to jump in, or I can?
Yeah, I would add on to that, because I saw that there was a question in the chat about how, well, if a client doesn't agree to it, they just move on to the next person. Pricing is very complicated. I think that a photographer needs to think about their overhead, their expenses, and determine from that, what do they need from a day rate in order to operate their business and cover their equipment costs and the upgrades and all that other kind of stuff. And it's up to them whether or not they're including some usage within that. But it also depends on a brand, because a Fortune 100 company is going to be able to afford more media than a venture that has just started up. So, pricing isn't necessarily a one size fits all. And it's important to think about the brand that you're working with. If they're local to one market, then they're not going to necessarily have a national buy. And so you take that into consideration. And I think Heather made a really good point that, and it's something that I know I try to do as well, is provide people with options that they didn't even ask for. Like, you say that you want unlimited time, unlimited use. That's probably coming from your legal department, because they're used to just catch-all contracts. Here's an alternative option. Oh, sorry guys, that's my daughter. Work from home.
So, Kelly, I have a bunch of clients that I work with directly. They're non-represented, or they might be represented, but they'll call me for they'll call me when a job comes their way and they want to just check on something. And so they always, and it's happened, I say always, but it's happened like 3 times fairly recently. I get a call or a text from somebody that I work with often, and they say, so what would you charge for X, this kind of usage? And my next question is always back to them is, what's a client? Who is the client? So to your point, you have to check all the boxes to then be able to determine what you can ask for. But
Right.
most importantly,
I would add to that
yeah.
Just because it's a big client or a big name client doesn't mean that you automatically charge more money. It just means the experience that they will have had in this industry purchasing photography. So it is a dance. It's a really hard thing, and you have to pull from your own, I saw a question earlier about, how do you determine your rates? Well, having been in the business for 25 or so years, like I have a lot of experience with many different levels of photographers that I can go to and be like, okay, well, for this photographer and this brand, which was very, very similar, we charged this and we received that. For this brand and this level of photographer, it was a lot less. So, you can, and for a photographer who does not have that experience, maybe they're going to need to reach out to their network of people and ask for some advice. But it isn't it's not like we open up our book and go, oh, that's the fee I'm going to charge. It's very much has to do with kind of the conversation around what the budget is, who the client is, what value you're trying to give, and if you're willing to, and what you understand your own value to be, and are you willing to walk away?
Yeah.
Right. And also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So sorry, Shel, go.
No, what I was going to add to Heather and Monica is basically asking those questions to the client, because as you said, they're always quick to say, I want unlimited. And a lot of times you need, when you're having these conversations, you're learning what is the shelf life of this product, because 6 months down the road, it's not even going to be on the shelves anymore, or something's going to change, or the product's going to change. So that's a whole new image. So those are the conversations that you need to have, and be confident in being able to understand or talk to the client, because a lot of times it's educating them and they just don't know too, is what I've learned in the past, with clients and in the conversations too. And then it's just kind of like a dialogue between the two of you or whomever, and having a conversation and collaboratively working together so that they can see like, oh, they're not really trying to get over on me. They're actually, teaching me something and kind of paying it forward, because that's what this is all about. Because, in the end, it helps everybody full circle.
What I was going to say was the other thing to note is that different agencies can have different assets for the same client. So you can have going off of yours, Kelly, Sephora. Somebody could be shooting Sephora and be the key agency of note. Well, there could be another agency that is also shooting a different asset that doesn't have the budget. So, again, to your point, Heather, just the name doesn't mean you can automatically charge more. So know all the different breakdowns by going to AMA, signing up, learning, and get that vernacular so you've got that down and the questions to ask. Clients, I think also, because it's easy, and somebody said it about the legal, it's probably led by the legal department, but they probably ask for unlimited use and time because it's easy. That's an easy thing to ask. Then they can put it away. Nobody needs to be tracking. They don't have to go through reuse down the road. But it doesn't mean that you can't ask for time limits and usage limits and parameters.
I think that's a
You
really
can also think about it. Oh, sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
No. I want to hear what you have to say.
I was just thinking that, if they ask for unlimited use, unlimited time, and you can't get them to narrow it down, find out what their intended usage is, right? So at least you'll feel better about, okay, actually, this really does only have a shelf life of a year, or they're really only going to use it in this market. And, you might not love that you're selling it for that rate, for that usage, but honestly, they're not going to use it for very, very much.
With the proviso that I would say, make sure that the no broadcast is in there, because that's a whole different level, right?
Also, asking where things live and educating the client. So much has changed. The conversation around it's just social or it's just digital is something that I think we could all use some education on. There's broadcast, now there's OTT, which is connected devices and over the top. And I think that is such a data rich media that I don't even think clients realize what it is that they're asking for. Because to me, that's like broadcast beyond in terms of how they can target consumers and the data that they can get from that. So I think it's really important that we learn from one another so that we can then also educate our clients, and that will help with pricing. I think we're also seeing this work for hire and unlimited usage because that's what was done or is the standard in the live action world. But now granted, I don't know if this is the case because I'm not a live action production company, but when that was agreed to and became the standard in that industry, there was one format to distribute live action on. And I would have to guess that now, looking back on that and the multitudes of ways in which motion work can be distributed, that they have some concerns about that at this point. So educating our clients, educating ourselves on the terms and leaning on our community to help with that is so important.
Jumping off of the, some of the things that you all touched on educating clients and the pushback that we receive when we're talking to clients, I'd love to hear from you if you think, that the increase in client direct work is affecting photographers' ability to stick to the licensing and usage structure, especially, when they are getting that kind of pushback and they do want to win the job and it's kind of a push and pull.
Because of client direct.
Yeah, on the subject of educating yourself so that you can have those conversations when people are pushing back against that pricing structure and why there have to be limitations.
I mean, Kelly, were you gonna answer?
No, you kick it off.
I think it's a tricky question because me personally, I am not experiencing anything different with client direct than I am with our agencies.
Yeah.
I think we're getting pushback across the board for unlimited usage, unlimited time, or work for hire, or copyright transfer, or whatever it is. I was saying the other day, I think half my time now, I feel like I'm a lawyer now. Half of my day is spent negotiating terms and conditions and POs, and I'm reinventing the wheel with every job. I feel like we should have a big powwow, all of us in the industry, and just or maybe that's what our AMA is. But so I don't think the client direct thing is hurting us. I just think it's more important than ever to make sure that we're all educated so that we can have those hard conversations with the client. Whether or not we end up agreeing or not, the conversation has to be had because everybody needs to be educated about the decisions that are being made and what they're offering and giving, for their rates.
And for the photographers out there that are not represented, to all your points, reach out to a friend, find a producer that you connect with, call them, call a rep friend, reach out, lean on your community to get the answers. There's also some really great groups that I'm a member of on Facebook that I go to often, not for this particular question necessarily, but there's people out there that would jump in and offer suggestions. You just lean on your community, and if you aren't comfortable in that space, and if you feel you need an advocate to give you the words and know the questions to ask. So I just wanted to add that in.
I think depending on what level of photographer you are, obviously will determine what level budgets are come your way. So if you can determine what the budget is of your job, that is going to be really helpful in figuring out what your fees will be, because you can then start with the big picture of what the budget is. You can work on the production that you need, and you can then, not that whatever's left over is your fee, but it'll start to make sense the more that you do it, because you'll start to see patterns of, oh gosh, okay, these people never have any money, or, oh, there's always about 30% left over, and that's about, that feels good for me for a fee, or whatever it is. But working within budgets as a whole end up being, I find, very helpful, as opposed to starting with, oh, here's the usage, this is what I want to charge for a fee, here's what we have left over for production. It's kind of this just mix of things that go into figuring it all out.
And in a perfect world, that would be terrific to get that answer every time, but
And you don't.
we don't get, you can ask the question, always feel okay to ask the question. I always do on every single job, because it saves a lot of time. We all spend so much time estimating, and the job is triple bid, sometimes more, and it goes away. You don't know. I mean, we can go into, that's a whole other conversation, but I always ask, because if they're willing to give me the information so I know the budget, that kind of tells me how I build how I build my budget, the level, to your point, Heather. And also I always, whenever I build budgets, I start with the photographer fees. And then I see what kind of production budget I'm working with. I start there, and sometimes we'll have to adjust fees to accommodate, but I typically start there and then understand what kind of production this can be. And, it's a dance. It's a fluid dance, but always ask the question, I think.
Yeah, I think this is really useful for photographers to hear, because I had to hear every job is different about 100 times before I believed that there wasn't some secret formula that I was unaware of that no one would tell me. So I think this is really good for photographers to hear, that like, you do have to just keep doing this in order to learn how to do it. And it's not the like neat answer that everyone wants to hear. But hearing other people's experiences slowly starts to make you feel like you're on the right track. Does anyone else want to chime in about this?
I think just going back to also starting with the question of what is your intended usage? I mean, what Heather said earlier, it's just such a great way to ask the usage question to begin with. So it doesn't become like, I want it for forever. I intend to use it in this way. And the only other thing I would say is that if someone says to you social media, to ask if that's social media on their owned and operated channels only, which means it's managed by the brand and it's the brand's website, versus paid social, because paid social is very expensive media. And it's important, I believe, that we start to create that distinction. When someone says like, it's just a social campaign, how else do you advertise?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And we're going to touch on paid versus organic social in a little bit. But I just wanted you touched on something that is in the Q&A. No. You touched on something that's in the Q&A. So I just wanted to actually pose that now to kind of just keep us in the rhythm. But what do you all do when a client doesn't know where the images are going to live? And I think we touched on this a little bit. But I think that we could have, a little bit more on this, is like, what do you do when they don't know all of the uses? Like, they're, get their intended uses, but do you have any tips in as far as having that negotiation and that conversation of like, okay, you're not sure, but like, what are you thinking about? And like, can we narrow it down, or, those kinds of things?
To this day, I've never run an estimate not knowing what the usage is. I can't really, we can't really do that. They have to define that, because they have to know what they are buying, because we can, this is the currency again of the photographer, and a full right to have that currency. And I have never, and maybe because I've said to them, I cannot accurately estimate this until we know how you intend to use it. So that needs to come up. So they've got to spend a little more time in the creative.
Yeah.
I would worry we'd shoot the job wrong.
Yeah.
We don't know where
Mhm.
it's going to live. Like, how do you know the various formats? Do you need
Right.
something really wide? Like, something could end up getting
Love
messed up. Like, we need the specs
Right.
of the,
Especially when talent's involved.
yeah, 100% with talent, because
Yeah,
talent doesn't typically give an unlimited license. Which
No.
Heather and I had this conversation the other day where we were like, why is it that clients
They get that.
limit talent usage, but yet they want me to give them unlimited? Like, can't we just be on the same track?
Yeah, those are definitely good points. So whoever asked that in the Q&A, just keep asking questions, keep digging. You do need that information, and especially the point you made about, like, I don't know if we'll shoot this right. I think that's something that you can tell them, because that's what they're investing in. You know,
Yes.
that's a really important part of their investment, is that it's done correctly. So yeah.
That is a red flag. So that was,
Okay.
add that to the red flags.
Okay,
They don't know.
We'll add it to our red flags then. Okay, we touched on this a little bit, but one question I wanted to ask is, you know, do you feel like unlimited use in perpetuity is a solution to some of these issues? Do you think that it takes away from the concept of the licensing structure? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I personally, I think that something that people don't understand is that when you work for hire, you are releasing your rights to those images. So if you technically want to use those images for self-promotion, you have to go back and get a license from the client to use them. So unlimited time, unlimited use in perpetuity gives the brand the rights to use it however it is that they need to, but allows you to hold the copyright for self-promotion. And I personally like to include in all of my contracts that the photographer retains the right for self-promotion within their and their agent's portfolio.
Anyone else want to jump in? Yeah, go ahead, Monica.
No, I agree. I agree with what Kelly said. Absolutely. I think that's, the verbiage is important. So that's touches on, you know, your terms, and I think that's really important to make sure that you, again, it's all about, I mean, this is a business, and you've got to treat it as such, and you are a commodity. What you're producing is a commodified thing. And I think that the more you can dive deeper into your rights, so you have everything should be listed on your estimate. So don't release an estimate out into the wild without all this stuff written in there. I think it all needs to be comprehensively listed out. Your usage, what you've navigated with your client, the terms, the timestamp, all that, what the deliverable assets. Make sure it's all in stone on your estimate when you're submitting it. Don't release an estimate out in the wild without all that together. But anyway, back to Kelly's point, I agree with her completely about the copyright.
Agreed.
I can add to that copyright. Something that doesn't really get talked about, or I don't know, thought about too much either, is this idea that if you are a photographer and you have a very specific look that you've created for a client, but then you release that copyright to them, or you sell that copyright to them, that look is not yours to use anymore. So you can't go create that look, use that same lighting or similar lighting or gels or whatever it is that you've done to the image. It's no longer yours, just even though you thought of it. So they could come back to you for copyright infringement in that case. It's all of this is a bit of a long shot, and it doesn't happen often, but you have to understand the ramifications of what it means when you relinquish your copyright. Mm-hmm. So it's a serious, important thing to hold on to.
Yeah.
That is a really important point. Okay. Let's see. So we're gonna pivot just a little bit. I have a few questions about estimating that I'm going to jump into here. So without, talking about specific numbers, are there any tips that you can give to photographers when they're estimating rates for licensing? And I know that we've touched on, that every job is different, but, any tools or websites that you trust for this kind of information? And someone touched on this earlier, but reaching out to your peers to compare, do you reach out to your peers to compare your estimates and your rates for different things? And how does that look for you? And how do you build those relationships? Whoever wants to jump in, or I'll call on someone.
I call Heather constantly. We don't talk rates necessarily though. It's more about like, I feel like I should value this higher, because I mean, for Heather and I, we both have photographers of varying degree of expertise on our roster. And so even within my own roster, what I would charge for people can be different, depending on the client and the job and all of those sorts of things. So I know that doesn't give a great answer of like, hey, here's where you go, but by having a community, and I mean, I think that that's what's so wonderful about the APA, and that's what we're hoping for with the AMA, is to create this sense of community so that you can develop relationships with people, to just have those conversations, not only about estimating, but I know I relied on my producer community so much in the time of COVID to just have a conversation about like, what does liability look like in COVID times? What do you need as a producer to do a job, and what's your comfort level with COVID on your set and managing that?
Yeah, I value community more than everything. This is probably what keeps me so keyed in. I so in love with this industry, is the people I get to work with, the relationships that you build. I've had the great pleasure of working with Heather a number of times over the years, and I would not even hesitate for a second if I had a question. I think I've called you in the past for, also just to bounce ideas and so there's a fluidity about that. And having, when you start working with people on the regular, you get into a rhythm and there's a trust there. So I think innately you have, then your community grows exponentially. And then it kind of opens doors to be able to reach out to people. If I'm stuck on a quandary, I have a number of people that I could reach out to. And it's only because of the time in the industry and the relationships I've built. If you're working on something, just find your community, find those that might have a few more years under their belt that could guide you, give you guidance, or reach out to a producer, or, I don't know if that can
remember your art producer.
Yeah.
That person is a huge resource for you. They've seen so many things come across their desk for that exact same client or other clients in that agency. And while they might not tell you exactly what to put the fee in, the way you can position it is like, I want to be a strong value for your client. Please let me know if I'm competitive. I don't want to lose a job over $3,000 or $4,000, or if I'm way over or way under. I'm just learning here. Like, honesty and transparency goes a long way, and they don't want to be embarrassed by your bid. They don't want you to be too high or too low, and that doesn't help them when they go into their clients. So don't lean on them for the answer. Be prepared with a strong point of view, but absolutely look to them as a resource to tell you where you fit in the mix and learn from that opportunity.
Knock, cost consultants.
Yeah.
You'll submit and they'll try to get the numbers. So hopefully you'll get an opportunity to sharpen your pencil if you're the higher bid or beef it up. It's been a couple times where I've had somebody come back and say, no, add more money in, and we ended up winning the job. So there's, it's just all around, but absolutely our producers, our buyers, our producers.
Another potential resource that I know was huge for me when I first started out as a rep was I use BlinkBid for my company. And I remember the first time I used it, and they have a catalog for photography. And it was just so helpful to see all the line items that somebody else, you know, once upon a time was charging for, that helped create this catalog, because they work with so many photographers and reps. And that was, you know, close to 20 years ago. And that was really eye-opening for me. A photo editor, .com, on his website, he has a lot of sampled estimates where he talks about the client and kind of the industry that they're working in and the rights, and again sort of lays out those line items just to help you have a bid that looks professional, and so that you know what kind of line items that you can charge for. If you don't feel like it's a job, or you could tap someone like Shel or Monica for their amazing expertise, those are a couple other good places that you could go just to get some samples of ideas of like, what can I even charge for? Like, what line items are typical?
Yes. Monica, you mentioned cost consultants. Can you just explain, you know, what that is for anyone who doesn't know?
So the way I understand it, and Heather, Heather and Kelly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I've always understood it is cost consultants are like a third party. So they work with an agency. They're an independent contractor that comes into the agency. I don't know if they're exclusive to the agency or they're independents that work with a variety, but they are brought on board to even out the playing field of the estimates. So typically we are triple bidding, and inevitably there'll be a high, a middle, and a low. And so I think their goal is to bring them closer together. So it's less about the numbers and it's more about the creative. And that is, so it's challenging. There are some really terrific cost consultants that understand production, but most definitely I've had the experience with some that have probably never stepped on set. So don't really understand the needs, the values of the various line items that I will put in an estimate. So it's a bit frustrating when something gets questioned that is, I couldn't do a job without it, whatever it is, or they're asking to reduce producer days, or, you know, when inevitably I think producers in general probably work 3 times what they actually estimate. And sometimes that job just goes away. It never gets awarded to them. So there's certain things that kind of get under my skin a little bit with cost consultants, because it's sort of a necessary, I mean, these big companies, they need them. It's part to save money and level the playing field. And I would love to hear you, Heather and Kelly, speak about them. Bouncing it over to you guys. All over to you.
Me?
Do you want to go first?
Sure.
You go ahead.
I mean, cost consultants are necessary evil. They exist. They're not on every job. My attitude or point of view on a cost consultant is like, kill them with kindness. Answer every question that they have as detailed as you possibly can. Hold your ground if you believe firmly that you shouldn't cut a rate or you need to have this in, and you know, have a point of view. That's why you're being hired. You know, the cost consultant is also being hired, and they're going to need to cut. So I always tell this story from when I was started at an ad agency, and it was so long ago. They would actually draw the comps, but the art director always talked about drawing hair on the arm, and we called it the hairy arm because then the client would say, I have too much hair on the arm. Let's like remove that, right? So they would draw it in ahead of time so that we would have something to cut. And we, in our group, we add things into our estimate. We add hairy arms so that they can have something to cut.
Oh my God, that's funny.
And a lot of times I'm coordinating that with my art producer. And she or he are saying there's a cost consultant. So then I'm coming to Shel or Monica and I'm saying, hey, you guys, there's a cost consultant. Let's pump this up just a little bit, which is completely insane. But I know that they're going to cut, and they're going to cut more than I'm pumping up as well. But it just makes it look a little bit better. It's unfortunate because the art producer is incredibly capable of getting those numbers in line and getting that bid down to where it is, but you know, the cost consultant has become a thing.
Hairy arms, I'm going to remember that.
I know. Ew.
So weird. Stuck.
Does anyone else want to chime in on this?
I think Heather said it perfectly. I think the only other thing that I would add is that you don't have to agree to everything. You just have to hear them, and you have to explain to them that they may believe that an assistant's day rate should be X, but your assistant is highly specialized and their talent deserves Y.
Yeah.
And, you know, a little bit of give and take, and then working with your producers to see if there are areas where you can make compromise.
In this landscape, so remember how I mentioned a high, middle, and a low when the triple bids come back. So whomever the low might be, it's very possible it could be a superstar in the social media stratosphere that they're bringing in. I mean, that does happen. We all know that, right? Like this, somebody that isn't as seasoned as the other two bidders, and so they might have a passel of crew that they work with on the regular, and their rates might not be industry standard. So I will push back, but I'm going to use hairy arms. I will never forget, Heather. But I will push back because crew, there's city rate. You know, every state has a different standard with rates. There are some that are universal, but you can go to California and rates are this. You can go to Minneapolis and rates are that. So I know what those rates are, and if they push back and to something even lower, I will definitely advocate.
Yeah, thank you for all of that. I want to make sure, because we've mentioned triple bidding a few times, I want to make sure that everyone understands what that is. So if someone could kind of just give a little bit of an explanation of why it happens, how it works. I think that would be great, just to make sure everyone's following along with us.
Well, triple bids, so most clients, most ad agencies, I think that probably have it as a unwritten law, rule that they are required to have 3 people bid on a job. So that is the role of the art producer, is to find the talent and to do the reach outs, find the right talent, bring them into this pool, then have the opportunity to send out the bid specs to the 3 producer or photographers. And it's just because there's some legal business requiring them to have 3. You can't just award it to the job, but to the photographer that you want, the creatives want. So can you guys speak more about that, the legal pieces to that, Kelly and Heather? So I'm sure there are.
I think it's mostly a cost savings effort. And I do think that there is something about, in terms of making sure that that the agency isn't getting a kickback, and that the bids are competitive and in line with the market rate.
And I would add some advice that when you're triple bidding, you're probably always triple bidding, and you're signing NDAs, that you make sure those NDAs are mutual, because you're sharing information in that bid process. So you don't want to create an approach or share ideas and then have someone else have the agency take those ideas and take them to another photographer who was less expensive. It's probably a hard thing to prove, but I mean, you are sharing information. There's no reason why you should just sign the NDA for you to hold their information confidential. They should be holding your information just as confidentially.
That's a really great point. How can we make sure that what we're signing is mutually beneficial?
I mean,
the title?
Yeah, I mean, you can make sure that the language says that, and typically, the header of the NDA that you're going to sign will have some of that language, and if not, you can read in the next 2 paragraphs. It typically is.
And when it's not mutual, you'll know, because it'll all be client focused, and then just ask for a mutual one. And 9 times out of 10, they have it in their back pocket. They just don't share it with you first.
Okay, that's great. So if it won't be buried that it's mutual.
No,
it's usually on top. And like Heather said, if you ask for it, they'll usually give you a mutual one. But I think the one other thing I would add is, don't sign anything unless you've actually read it. I
Yeah,
can
and people
tell you.
try and put usage in the NDAs now every once in a while. So,
Yeah.
you know, work for hire, copyright, like all of that stuff that has nothing to do with an NDA. So definitely read it.
Or non-competes as well.
Yeah.
So
Most of us are not attorneys, so find yourself a friend who's an attorney.
You're
You know,
right.
get some legal eyes on it, because I can't make my way through a legal document. It's just my brain goes numb. So I get yourself some. Again, you have to, this whole thing is a business, so really treat it as such. Value what you're putting out there and read everything for sure.
the AMA currently has on its website a breakdown of standard PO terms as well that can educate you just on their meaning and maybe some possible alternatives for negotiation should you not feel comfortable. Heather did an amazing blog post on it years ago, and she's given that information over to the AMA. And so that's another resource where you can go if legal terms are daunting for you, as I know that they are for me, even though I've been reading these contracts for years.
They just make you go cross-eyed sometimes. Like,
Oh, they
I'll put in
do.
my best effort to read it, and then I'm just like part of the way through, and I feel like my brain's gonna fall out.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so a question going in a slightly different direction. So some people are moving away from the term day rate and using creative fee instead. I would love to know your thoughts on this and whether this is something you're having to explain to clients or whether it's something that people are generally understanding now. And then I also wanted to, while you're talking about that, if you have any tips for photographers, especially people who aren't represented, tips for how to communicate that difference during their negotiations and conversations with clients.
Who do you want to answer?
Heather, you spoke first.
Damn. I mean, a lot of it comes, there's lots of reasons to use day rate or creative fee or project fee or usage or whatever. And I know one is if there's a tax reason. There are certain photographers should look up and talk to their accountant about, usage isn't taxed, or day rate. I get them confused. I have it written down, but one is taxed and the other is not, or taxable and is not as income. So, and maybe it's different by state. So I used to represent a photographer that liked me to separate a day rate out from the usage fee for that very reason. But sometimes the budget is such and the negotiation is such that it's easier to put it all in as a big project rate. But also I like to separate out usage sometimes and have the usage be, higher, because I want to be able to negotiate usage later on based on that usage number. And if I ever do discount my fees, I put the usage rate in at the regular rate, and then I put a negative number in as a discount, so that 2 years from now, when I don't remember what the heck this job was about, I'm like, why would I put in such a low fee? I'm like, oh, it was a discount, but we're going to renegotiate the extra usage based on the original usage fee.
That's a great strategy. Let's hear from Shel.
The whole creative and day rate, I think it also depends on the client. I know we've talked about this back and forth about, every project is different, but if you are using a creative rate or creative fee, I always still somehow, some way, make sure that you do account for those days in there. A lot of times, it might be just a visual thing with the client for them just to be able to see that. I feel like a lot of times that's what it is a visual. But then you don't want to undercompensate your bids. And then also, to Heather's point regarding the usage, make sure that's line itemed out, because again, you want to be able to have that safety net to go back to it and negotiate whenever you need to.
Monica?
I think so I was understanding your question to be about the word creative fee versus photographer fee. And I haven't had, I just like the word better. I feel like because they're a creative partner, a photographer is a creative partner, and it feels more enveloped in the project. And so for me, I like the word, I like that title better than photographer fee. No issues. All the stuff that the ladies are saying, I'm in agreement with. So
Okay.
yeah, not much to add there.
Okay. Anything from you, Kelly?
No, I agree. I mean, I think what Shel says is really smart of like, if you're going to do a lump sum fee, line item out what your prep is, what your shoot is, what your post is, what all of that looks like. So you can go back and say you have an accounting. So if they come back and add a shoot day, you can say included in my creative fee was only 3 shoot days and now you're adding a 4th.
Okay.
You'll need that to fall back on.
I would also add that right now I'm trying, I don't always get it, but I'm trying to add more money for pre-production, not a pre-pro day, but pre-production. I mean, people are planning further in advance. Our photographers are spending way more time on pre-production, never mind the amount of time they spend on their treatments. And I feel like that time needs to be accounted for. As as photographers, directors, your time is your inventory, and it's not just a shoot day. You know, there's a lot of other time that's put into this. So you might have a tech scout fee, you might have a pre-pro day fee, and you might have a pre-production fee and a post-production, wrap fee. So you should keep that all in mind, even if it means you put it in and then you put a discount so that people start to see that you're trying to account for that.
Yeah. Do you think that people have, been spending even more time on pre-production as well because of COVID? And that's something that we should also factor in over the next year, is that we're going to be continuing to have to, put in more time in that aspect as well?
Absolutely. I feel like too, like the photographer is also becoming the art director too, because the art directors haven't been able to be on shoots. So they have to put in that time. So they're acting sometimes as the art director when communicating things back and forth, and that all needs to be accounted for.
Yeah.
Especially as you start, more brands are bringing agencies in-house, they rely on production as well as the photographer to step in and fill in some of those creative gaps, which is exciting, but it does take you away. It does limit you in terms of the time that you can spend on other projects.
Right. We should definitely be accounting for all of this extra time for sure. One thing that I saw related come into the Q&A is, some people including usage within their creative fee or day rate, including the usage instead of breaking it out. Do you ever do that? And if you don't, why?
It really depends, at least for me, on what, I know we keep saying this, every job is really different and every brand is different. And so that ends up making it's a determining factor on whether or not the use and the fee goes together. Like sometimes it's just how you package the estimate for the client and how the client is used to seeing it as well.
And maybe I'll slightly rephrase and say, if you do it, when does it make sense to do it? And when does it not make sense to do it? In my experience in starting out and working with a lot of small businesses, when I would break out licensing, I found that I was getting a lot of pushback. And so when I work with smaller businesses, I started to include it a lot and do creative fee plus licensing. But now I'm on the other side of that, where I'm finding it limiting, because like Heather was mentioning later, being able to go back and negotiate on the licensing and having a good number there becomes really important later on if you want to go back and add usage or renegotiate the usage.
Yeah, I would say typically smaller brands and clients that don't have as much experience in the industry, it's easier for them to comprehend a one lump sum. But that's why it's also, right, I have a mentorship program, and for a lot of the mentees, it's just easier for them to give one lump sum that includes the assistance and all the other things. And even then, I still say, like, put it as a line item. You don't even have to put the total of what the assistant is, but include it as a line item of, this is everything that's included in that. And this is my fee, and this is what the expenses cost.
Educating the client.
And articulate your estimates, articulate everything. Yes, definitely. I agree with that.
Okay, so something that we said we were going to come back to earlier is making the distinction between organic and paid social media, and how you, show that difference or differentiate in your estimates, but also how you, talk about that with clients and, figure out how to, navigate that process. Heather.
Damn, I wasn't going to say anything. It's communication. I find a lot of times too, clients or art producers at an agency or brand direct, it doesn't matter who it is, when you ask the question, they just are like, unlimited social, right? Like they're hesitant to break it out because they don't have all the information, or they don't want to go to the account people, or they haven't figured out their media plan. So they're just like, put it all in. I'm trying to get them to understand the difference and to really pay attention to it, because there is a difference, and there's a lot of money put behind paid social, and it's not just social. So, and organic social for one brand is way different than another. So, having that conversation ahead of time will really help inform how I price something out.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it's to me, it is different if one of my artists is shooting something that's going to be live on a brand's operated site or their operated website. I think digital as a bucket is something that there needs to be a conversation about. Does that include connected devices? I had a client one time lump, I know it's big in LA at least, digital billboards on the side of the freeway. And I was like, that's outdoor.
Yeah.
Totally different than like a social media. So just having that conversation and understanding it. And you can do it in a way that, the art of a phone call is something that should be embraced of, hey, can we have a quick 10-minute call? I just want to make sure I fully understand your usage and hear a little bit about the project. And sometimes just chatting with somebody, you can understand, like, is this a big brand initiative, or is this a smaller shoot for this client? Oh,
Pick up a
someone's
phone?
asking,
What is
why
that?
can't we charge more? Okay, so paid social advertising are big media buys that have a much further, broader reach, as opposed to a brand's own social channel. Yes, that can then be repinned or retweeted or reposted, but still that is limited to organic reach that comes from that brand. To Heather's point, every brand has a different followership based on their size, and so that needs to be considered. But paid social media advertising, and especially if you're thinking about like YouTube TV is how my husband and I receive all of our television shows. So if you're doing a social motion spot for a brand that's going on YouTube TV, that is coming into my household, and Google runs my business, it runs my life, and that advertiser is going to know that I just bought a new home, I've got 2 kids, I love HGTV. These are the times when I'm on the internet and the way in which to target me. And that is very, very valuable information for a brand. And I believe should come at a premium cost.
I agree.
That's a really great point. Yeah, I think, just social is such a flag for conversation, to jump on the phone. Like you said, 10 minutes. I mean, so many things can be clarified in just a few minutes on the phone. So it's definitely worth chatting through. Shel, was there something that you were going to add to that?
No, she added everything. I was just agreeing. It comes with the premium.
I mean, it's your competitive advantage, whether or not you want to charge more for that. I personally believe and price in that way.
And the more people talk about it, the more we will be able to charge more for it.
Right.
Especially you're all doing more motion than you've ever done before. So motion lives in that space, is valued in that space. So it's really important to have the conversation around it and make sure people understand. I keep talking about connected CCTV and over the top TV. I'm excluding that along with broadcast from our motion work, and people are like, what is that? What is that? And I'm explaining it to them, and some are like, oh no, I want that. And then I get a chance to put a little bit of extra money in, or others are like, oh yeah, I don't want that. But now I've had the chance to explain it to them and what it is. So yeah, it's important.
A question that I want to ask before we get to the Q&A, we're getting close to Q&A time. So everyone who's watching, if you have something that you want to add to the Q&A, do so now. The question I want to ask is, what are some signs that photographers should keep in mind for when we should reach out for help with an estimate or a bid to you or someone like you? And I know this may be different for, producers and reps, but, at what point, if it's a point in our career or if it's specific jobs that we get, when should we be reaching out for help? This is more related to like one-off bids, where maybe we receive an inquiry and we're not quite sure how to handle it ourselves.
And that's when you should reach out.
Yeah.
I mean, if something's confusing you, or you're not quite sure what the scope of the job is, or you might even not know the questions to ask. I mean, so as you grow a career, at some point you're gonna get bid specs, and you're trying to and my God, I hope it would not be like a Leo Burnett bid spec. It's super complicated, very detailed, but hopefully you'll stair step up to that level. But you're gonna at some point get, as you're growing your career, you're gonna get an ask to bid on a job, and you'll get all this paperwork, and it might, if it's confusing to you, that's the time you reach out to somebody. If there's something you don't understand, and it's inevitably going to happen to every budding photographer out there as their career grows, I would hope.
Agreed. And also ask the people within the crew who you're going to be working with or collaborating with as well. I find out a lot of times when we do these jobs, people bid and they underbid and they underestimate. And so when you get to the shoot or get to the job, it's unrealistic and you're setting your crew up to fail. So it's important to ask the question, like, how long is it going to take to get this done realistically? And again, it's a song and dance also with your crew as well as it is for your client. So it's always important to ask those questions.
That's a really good point. Anyone else want to chime in on this before we go to the Q&A? Okay. Okay, this is somewhat related. Our first question here is, how do you navigate conversations when clients don't provide their budgets and instead ask for the estimate first, which happens a lot? It makes it harder and time consuming to form an estimate because you're shooting in the dark and you don't know if what you're creating matches their budget or the level of complexity for the project. I know
So
that we touched on this earlier, but yeah, let's expand.
what I always do is I write the word assumption all over the estimate. Make sure that
Okay.
it's clear that I'm making the assumption we're going to be shooting 8 talent, so that if they come back and are looking at it, and that's, then their creative is forming and they're deciding, oh, we're going to have now 6 talent, then we can scale back. But I write the assumes word everywhere on the bid, because they need to know, if they can't provide me, and I just pulled an all-nighter last night finishing up an estimate that I got out, and it's a motion project and they didn't have the fully fleshed out specs. So we wrote, I mean, assumption all over that thing, because you have to go by something, you have to give it a structure. And it's unfortunate because it does take so much time to put together an estimate. And it's hard, because obviously the most efficient thing is tell me what your budget is. That helps me know where to start, and it's less back and forth, because anyway, so that's what I would say.
That's a great tip. I'm going to use that immediately.
I would say one of the things that I like to do, and I'm getting more and more passionate about this as the industry is heating up, like my time, my producer's time, my team's time is so valuable. And I 100% want to be a partner with my clients and help them budget. Absolutely. I want them to come to me for that. But there are times when things come across my desk that are so unbelievably disorganized and they're not willing to give me any numbers that I just can't work with that. So I won't estimate. I will send them in an email, like, this is what I think I'm hearing from you. I will give them sample usage. I will give them talent breakdowns. I will give them location breakdowns, something that I can actually pull from even a previous bid and kind of manipulate a little bit of like, this is what I'm hearing from you. Let's hop on the phone and have a phone call so that you can at least give me a little bit of background of what you're hearing from your creatives. And that helps me hone in on the numbers. Or I can, based on if they won't give me a budget and I'm not sure that the brand and I are going to be aligned in terms of what we're thinking, I've done enough estimates now, and I'm sure everybody will get to this point where I can say, like, this one-day photo shoot with this many talent and these types of locations is going to be in the range of 100 to 150,000. Are we even in the ballpark with one another? So that at least you can kind of narrow that funnel down a little bit before you go and chase your tail, because estimates take a ton of time. Treatments take a ton of time. And I'm sure all of us on this webinar have had those where you're having an amazing creative call and the deck is incredible and you're so excited. And then they're like, we have $5,000. And you're like, you want to shoot for 4 days. So it's, having that preparatory conversation can be really helpful. And that's a fraction of your time to do, as opposed to, a full bid, a full treatment, a full creative call, all that kind of stuff.
I could not emphasize that enough, because have something in your back pocket when you ask for the budget and they say you don't know what it is, but you don't know you've never worked with this client before, you don't have any experience, and they say, but it's okay, I think we have enough. They might think $10,000 is enough, but this is really a $75,000, $100,000 job, whatever it is. Say, oh, I just recently produced a job that had 6 talent and 2 locations over 2 days with a tech scout, and that came in at $85,000. Are we in the same ballpark? They might fall off their chair and say, oh my God, no. Or they might be like, oh yeah, we're good. Estimate the way that you need to. And I know it feels weird to say, I just want to make sure you can afford me. Like, you're not going to say it like that, but like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page here in terms of what you're asking versus the type of production you see in the images that you were attracted to cost this much. So are we aligned? And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you end up having to, spend a little bit more time digging and trying to be a client service and a resource for them and doing their homework for them. But the more you can, I don't know, have that conversation before you put pen to paper, or start engaging Shel or Monica or the rest of your crew on it. Like, that's a lot of work for everyone.
Yeah, we have shells of estimates, like location shoots and studio shoots, that we can just not put a client or anything and be like, these are roughly the line items for this, that we can kind of crank out really quickly. You know, even sometimes after you have those preparatory calls, you don't feel it. Sometimes you just need to have, they need to react to something, but something that saves you a little bit of time.
Okay, another question from the Q&A is, how would you explain usage to an uneducated client? And since we touched on this a little bit, I think this like expansion could focus on like language or just like tips when you know, if there's any particular ways that you explain things kind of in plain language that you find helpful. Anyone can go first.
I'm really excited for the usage glossary that's going to be launching by the AMA very soon, because I think that it'll be, you know, again, it's just definitions, but it will be a resource for our industry and for clients to pull from.
I do think our industry is at a point where even the clients, whether they be the advertising agency clients or the brand direct clients, are recognizing that usage has changed and evolved, and we're all wondering what everything means. Like, we are like looking for this glossary. You know, I've had a few brands call me, you know, contacts that I have at brands saying, can you explain what this usage is to me? What do you have a document that you can share with me? I need to go back to my team. So everybody, I think, is feeling it right now. So you know, until this glossary comes out, what you can do is, you know, Google it, look it up, define it, talk to your producer, talk to your art producer. What are they interpreting it? Talk to your other photographer friends, and just be as specific as you possibly can about what the usage is.
Okay.
I would say it's okay, and it's a strength to be okay with not knowing what you don't know, and just ask. I find this industry is such a giving industry of, you know, people willing to share their knowledge. You know, to the point of the AMA, that you guys have created this thing. It's amazing. But be okay not knowing what you don't know, and just ask questions.
I love that sentiment. Thank you. Okay, let's see. This is a follow-up question. Can someone define OTT versus broadcast? Also, what does no broadcast mean? What is it that we're trying to exclude?
I'm going to Google this really great article and put it in the chat.
Okay.
So Kelly, do you want to answer it? And
I'm pulling it up right now, actually.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yes, Heather and I have talked about this article quite a bit. But it's a really good resource for explaining, and I'll just read what it says really quickly about what is over the top. Over the top is content that is streamed through the internet and watched on smart TVs, phones, and streaming devices such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV. In other words, it's the content that's served up over the internet rather than through cable or satellite TV. Connected TV and OTT are not the same thing. They're closely related. Connected TV refers to the device that you watch the OTT content on. So you're over the top, or you're bypassing cable and satellite TV. And then it goes into describing the benefits about how you can hyper target your audience, you can retarget across channels, and you can track whether or not you're getting traction on your ads. So with broadcast, it gets served up over the cable companies, it goes into household, it can tell you the number of households. With over the top advertising, it gets served up, and like I said, you find out very specific data about the person that saw that ad, because a lot of times that's also connected to your iPhone, and all of the apps and the companies can track and get your data that way. They can see your Facebook posts and your Instagram posts and what you're liking on TikTok and all that other good stuff.
And so when our photographers are and directors are doing motion, we are limiting that motion usage to, we're saying no broadcast. So they get unlimited usage, not including broadcast, but we're also adding to that now, excluding OTT and connected TV as well. A lot of times they don't need it. That's not what they're looking for it for. They just want it for their social or on their, banner ads or whatever, or their websites, and that's totally fine. But for those people who want the other, the other usages, they're going to need to pay for it, because if this were a broadcast shoot, it would be way more expensive than what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really helpful. Okay, I have another question here. Has anyone ever turned down work due to cost consultants calling out cuts that would make the job untenable?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I see nods.
I will also, this is not exactly related, but it was something that was surprising that happened to me recently. I was working with an editorial house, their branded content division, and they were coming to us for a limited time social campaign for one of their clients. But in the course of negotiating the contract, the branded content company said that they needed work for hire usage, which when we got on the phone, the way I understood it is that this publishing company that now has the branded content advertising agency internally, they were producing this advertising, the social advertising for one of their advertisers, advertorial. But should that client like those assets and then want to buy additional usage, they wanted to own the assets so that the client had to come back to them to purchase the usage, not the photographer, no longer having the copyright with them. We did not feel comfortable with that, in part because we felt like if all advertising agencies started to do that, we would really be undercutting the market. So we didn't feel comfortable with it. But it was something that was surprising to me because I hadn't encountered that before. And really, when we started to dig in and read the contract and ask for specific terms, that's when we discovered it, because the project was initially positioned to us as a limited time social campaign. Just something to be mindful of.
Okay. Another question before I answer. I have two last questions. One's for the producers and one's for the reps. So my last question here is going to be, do you have strategies on how to provide options of pricing on the bid itself and how much it's worth it to do that? For instance, giving different prices for rentals, licensing, extra images beyond agreed upon deliverables, etc. So like different options within the estimate based on maybe different price points and usages. Is that something that you all do in your estimates?
Is that coming to the producers, or who are you asking? Which group, or everybody?
I think this is to everyone.
Well, oftentimes back in the day, back in the earlier day, before I sort of knew better and knew how to do it more efficiently, you'd get asked to do like multiple versions of bids at any given time, like 3-4 versions. I've done, probably the most I've ever done is 5 different versions showing different variables, different talent count, different deliverables. And now what I give them what they want in the body of the bid. And if we do get creative and want to offer motion, we always try to offer motion on a still shoot because it's an asset. They may not think they want it, but sometimes it gets them thinking. Sometimes they choose they want it, but I don't necessarily, I typically bid estimate what they're looking for. They tell me the variables that they'd like to see, whether they like to see it talent usage for, and photography usage for 3, 5, and 7 years, for example. I put that into, not into the numbers, but into the overview of the estimate, so they can see that broken down. I try to put everything, all the variables, in one estimate so it's visible. They can see it, as opposed to doing multiple versions of the estimate. So yeah, there's a great opportunity to add value to a shoot. And so you can pitch them something that they may not have thought about. Social videos and things that you can add value to, if it makes sense, if there's time. But yeah, so we do offer, and it's often generated by the photographer. He thinks, well, let's throw in, see if they want to, throw in some motion. If it's a small amount of, an up charge, then they might consider it. But that's my answer.
Okay. Yeah, I think
I would
that's
piggyback on that.
Yeah. Okay.
I would piggyback on what Monica said. Otherwise, again, trying to create all the estimates. Estimates are very time consuming, and it's just easier, and it's an easier, quick reference for the client to make that decision as well, because, all of a sudden they have the budget to do the additional ask. So it's always nice to have it right there in the summary or in the quoted area.
I'd also add that, just like there's options for adding, there's options for removing. And you want to make the art producer's job easy. You don't want to, maybe they want to see 5 different versions of the bid, which we all know we have done a gazillion times and more.
Yeah.
But there's also a way that you can create your bid, and then in your email summary say, for X amount of more, you can use this type of equipment, or we can remove this. Here's what's variable in your estimate. At this point, I can't make these decisions. I need to have a conversation with you about what you're valuing and what's important to you. Read through this, tell me which one of these variables makes sense to you, and we can revise our estimate from there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I have 2 last questions. The last question for the producers is, what does it look like to work with a production company on a one-off project, and what fees can we expect to share?
Shel?
You said, what is it like to work with a production company?
Yeah, for someone who
production.
hasn't had the experience, for a photographer who hasn't had the experience of working with a production company yet, like, what does that look like? What's that relationship, like through the job, and what kinds of expenses should we always expect to, or should we always anticipate? I think is.
Got it. I was going in a whole different direction. Thank you for clarifying.
I was too. So it would be more like a collaborative, is what you're thinking of, as far as like a photographer reaching out and with a production company?
It seems like that's what they're asking. Yeah. Like at that point of growth where you're, wanting to work with producers, but you haven't done it yet, and you're nervous to reach out, you don't know what to expect. What does that relationship look like?
That's happened to me a few times. I'm so sorry, Cheryl. You go first.
No, go ahead.
That's happened to me a few times where I've actually been reached out to by an ad agency, an art producer that I know, and they'll reach out to me and say, hey, would you mind working with this particular photographer? Is new, this will be his first big project or her first big project, and walking him through the process to the bid. And I've done that a number of times. And so I've been on the front lines with that firsthand. And it's a lot of educating. It's they're coming to me from my knowledge and my experience in the industry. And they kind of entrust. What's that look like? You need to hand over the reins and trust and learn while you're in this, because all of a sudden and I've done this so many times. I've had some train wreck or two, but there was, for example, I've had an example with a shooter who is used to like them and a camera, and all of a sudden they were thrust into the big stage with a team and not even understanding. So be in the place to learn, because not even understanding what is a digital tech, what is that role, the role of all the people, understanding why they're there, understanding that now, it's going to feel overwhelming, but trust, and ask questions. And hopefully your producer will be able to gently walk you through the process to understand why we have now all these people on set and what is their role. So I guess be in this space to learn, because it's exciting when that happens, because big stuff is ahead if you're starting to jump in that game. And there's a lot to be learned from every single person that will be brought on set. Yeah, I guess that's my answer.
That was great. And I also think it's, I'm glad that you made the point that people reached out to you and let you know that it was the photographer's first time working with the producer. I think that a lot of times people think they should fake it till they make it, and they're not sure when they should be honest about something like that. So I think I'm really glad that that came up as well in your answer.
Yeah, what I just said a few sentences ago, be okay with what you don't know, and learn. Yes, you can fake it till you make it. I mean, a lot of people have done that in their careers and it works out in their favor. Sometimes it doesn't, but surround yourself with people that know more than you and learn. And every job you're going to get, stronger and better and more knowledgeable. So, Shel?
I agree with that 100%. I mean, your producer is going to protect you and protect, your vision. And again, kudos if you, are entered into that realm, because you are getting ready to go into something bigger and better. And the thing is, they have to understand that it's a collaborative effort, and they will kind of guide you and walk you, and will have your back. I mean, anyone that I work with, they'll know, like, I got you, like nothing's going to happen. Like we got this, we're in this together. And you can actually focus on your craft. This is why you are here. You're remembering your why. This is your why right here at this moment. So those are the things that you can kind of like sit back and smile, like, man, I'm on my way, kind of thing. And then also, we worked collaboratively with the client and learning and sharing as far as creatively, and letting them know, like, hey, we're going to see this thing through from the beginning to the end, and have fun. That's the main thing. People need to remember, remember your why. You got into this business, and have fun. I mean, no one wants to go to work pissed off. Like, and like, I love what I do. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, and I love the people I work with. And remember, this is like a marriage, like with the people that you work with, when you're building your crews and understanding that. So when a client does come to you and say, hey, work with this producer, we're picking out people who you're going to mesh with, not somebody who's going to bring I know it all to the crew, because we don't have time for that. Like, we're in this together. You're important, you're important, you're important. So, those are the things, like, when those opportunities come, and, they're awesome, because it's just nice to see that light come on, and, they're able to just do their magic.
I love the answer. That sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, so last question for the reps. How do you get repped by an agent? Do they have to sign you on and find you? And I'll just add to that, like, if you want to say a little bit about what that relationship looks like, I think that would all be helpful information. Kelly.
I actually think that if you have a job that's complicated and you need some advice, it's actually really great to target a rep that you want to work with. Every rep, their organization is different, and they approach jobs differently, and they bid a bit differently. And I am personally a big fan of dating beforehand, because they're your business partner. And it's important to understand how they do business and if it aligns with the way in which you do business. So having a complicated job, someone comes to me, I can connect them with a wonderful producer like these ladies, or I can give them some guidance. Sometimes I'm just in the background having a conversation about how to craft an email, or giving some advice on how much to follow up. But that also gets you on the rep's radar. And, I work with I work with a lot of photographers off roster, and I'm suggesting them for projects as well, and seeing, are they up for the task? Are they at the level of ready, to be my business partner? And I'm using this word business partner intentionally. I think that there is sometimes this thinking that I get signed on a roster and then automatically jobs just come in and the reps bring them to me. I can do everything. If you give me a goal list of clients, I will make sure that your work is seen. But your work is what's going to sell you in. And providing me with the tools on a consistent basis to go back out and advocate for you is 100% important. So, promote to reps, but also bring them projects, show them that you are income generating for them, and test out different reps to see who you like doing business with and what sorts of resources they have that can help you grow your career as well.
Awesome.
I mean, ditto, exactly. I feel 100% the same way. The only thing I would add to that is, I've always advised people, don't send me an email, or most reps probably an email saying, hi, I'm looking for a rep, do you want to represent me? Because my answer is going to be no every time if I don't know you. But if you reach out to me and say, hey, I have a job I need some advice on, or I need to bid, or, oh, hey, I have a website, a new website, enjoy, don't ask me to critique it for you, just like I'm not going to ask you to take me a quick picture. But be in front of me, get on my radar, because when it is time for me to fill a spot on my roster, or I'm missing a type of photography, I'm going to go to the people whose work that I know first. So think about it more like relationship building or dating than about, signing at first.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for, that great answer. And thank you to all of you today. We're going to wrap it up here. But can't thank you enough for this really valuable conversation. I'm so glad that you all joined me today. Thank you for everyone who's here watching. Thank you to these sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. And just super grateful to have been able to have this conversation with you. And we'll hopefully have something else like this soon.
It's been
Thanks
a pleasure.
for including us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody.